Hey everyone, and welcome to Pagan Happy Hour. Happy Friday, everyone. I hope you have had a good April Fools so far. So, today we will be discussing the trickster archetype and different trickster deities. So, we'll be going over what the trickster archetype even is. We'll be discussing examples of the trickster archetype in popular culture, in children's stories, in literature, in movies. And then we will be looking at trickster deities. And then we'll tie it all off with a bit of a discussion on why the trickster archetype and trickster deities are so important and what wider message do they have for us as a culture. So that is what we will be discussing tonight. And if you are new here, welcome. I do Pagan Happy Hour every Friday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's just a great way for us fellow pagans and witches to chat, to share a drink, to have a discussion. So I will be looking over here at the chat as we go along. I'm going to be bringing in your thoughts, your ideas, your questions as much as possible so that this is really a interactive discussion. So there are two ways you can support Pagan Happy Hour if you do enjoy the show. The first way is through my Patreon, which I have linked down below. If you do choose to join my Patreon, you also gain access to my exclusive Discord community, which is just a really fun place to chat and share resources with fellow pagans. And the second way you can support the show is through super chats, which is the $ button at the bottom of the chat. Through that, you can donate any amount, and your question or comment or idea will pop up really big for me in the chat. So I will be sure to see it and I will bring your ideas into the conversation. So now that we got that out of the way, I would love for you all in the chat to tell me where you are watching from and what you happen to be drinking. So let me cue that drink music and let's get started. Okay, let's see. Let me have a little sip here. Okay, we have people chiming in from Georgia. I'm in Georgia. Let's see. We have people chiming in from Oregon, from Maryland, from Arlington, Wisconsin, DC, Ohio, Michigan, England, Wyoming, Miami, Virginia. Whew. Let's see. We have Indiana, UK, the Ozarks, Vegas, Canada, upstate New York, Illinois, New Mexico, South Florida, Buffalo, Kansas City, Northern California, Seattle, San Francisco, New Zealand, and Pennsylvania. Okay. Good job, guys. You guys are really active in the chat today, which is fun. I hope you all have a drink with you. I have kind of a modified version of a old fashioned tonight because I ran out of Cointreau and put some homemade kombucha in there. It's not necessarily good, but it's not horrible either. So we're going with it. But let's jump into the topic. We are discussing the trickster, which I think is a wonderful topic for April Fool's Day. I was so happy to see you all choose this topic in the Thursday poll. If you're unaware, every Thursday I put a poll on my community page. So I actually let you all choose the topic for Pagan Happy Hour each Friday. So of course, check that out if you haven't been voting previously. Let me turn off this drink music and we will jump into the topic. Okay, so the trickster. Now, this is such a fascinating archetype. So I thought I would start out by just having a bit of a discussion on what is the trickster. So the trickster is usually a character in a story. Now, that could be a children's story, that could be a myth, it could be a legend, it could be part of a religious text or story. The trickster could be human, it could be an animal. So the trickster can definitely come in many forms. But the trickster in general differentiates himself from the rest of the characters because he exhibits a really high degree of intelligence or some type of secret knowledge. And then he uses this knowledge to play tricks or otherwise kind of disobey the normal order of society. He defies conventional behavior. So he's using his intelligence to kind of shake up the system in some way or cause the other characters to look at the world from a different perspective. Um, let's see. Oh, I'm checking your comments now. I see a good one from Leah that says, I've noticed in folk tales that the tricksters were often used to teach children lessons about not trusting strangers. Yes, children's stories in particular do have quite a few trickster characters, which we'll get into in a little bit. And often children's stories place those trickster archetypes in there in order to teach lessons or morals. Now, another thing that's interesting about the trickster, I think, is he appears in almost every culture in a variety of myths and stories. So this is really universal, and that's what makes the trickster one of the essential archetypes. And I think you can also think of the trickster as a boundary crosser, someone who transcends the norm, who crosses that boundary. And that's kind of interesting too. In previous pagan happy hours and videos, we've talked about um, things like the crossroads as a concept in relation to witchcraft, crossing boundaries and what that represents. So the trickster, you can definitely think as someone who crosses boundaries whenever he can. Now, he is someone who circumvents kind of traditional, both physical and societal rules. He kind of violates the principles of social and natural orders in the world. He likes to playfully disrupt normal life and then he wants to reestablish it on a new basis. So, anytime a trickster character is introduced, you know that the current order, the current way of the world is about to be shaken up in some way. Now, I did want to spend a second discussing the difference between the trickster and like a clown or a comedian because they are kind of different ideas. So the trickster is kind of a non-performing trick maker. He doesn't perform in the same way. He, may have his own kind of motives for doing what he's doing, but these motives aren't being told to an audience or the general public or to others. He keeps them internal. So he has kind of this motive that is not always known to the public at all, or maybe it's known at the very end, but it's kept very secret. Now, that's very different from a clown or a comedian that is inherently a performer. They take on the persona of the clown and they like engage in a performance. And so it's quite a bit different than the trickster, who is kind of in the shadows doing his own thing. He doesn't necessarily want people to know what he's doing. So it's not a performative act. And that's the main difference between the trickster and like a clown or a comedian. We have our first super chat from Daka. Cheers. Thank you very much. He says, there are quite a few Slavic and Central European stories where the trickster steals money and a horse from the rich by claiming he is from another world or the afterlife. That's really interesting. I'd love to read up on some of those stories. I've been recently trying to learn more about Slavic paganism. So thank you for sharing that. And thanks again for the super chat. Okay. And another comment here that I'm noticing that says in the Aesop fables, tricksters tend to be predatory animals such as lions, spiders, and wolves. Yes, we will get into that as well. Of course, in children's stories, many characters are often animals, and there actually is a precedent, especially in American children's stories and fables, especially if they're coming in any way from the Native American tradition, where the majority of tricksters were animal spirits. But we'll be getting into that shortly. So we went over kind of the idea of the trickster or the archetype of the trickster, what it is, who he represents. And of course, I'm just using he here, but it could be she, it could be any gender that the trickster is. And then we also talked a bit about the major differences between the trickster and other figures like a comedian or clown. So now I wanted to shift to talk a bit about tricksters in popular culture. I wanted to go over this first, and then we will go over to tricksters that are deities in different pagan religions. Because I think it's neat how many famous tricksters we have in popular culture. And as someone in the comments pointed out earlier, often they appear in children's literature and movies and stories. So I would love for you all in the comments to think about children's stories and movies and literature that you're aware of, and list in the comments some trickster characters that you are fond of or that you can think of. I'll list a few of ones that come to my mind, but I'd love to hear from you all. What trickster character comes to your mind first when you think of children's stories? I see them coming in now. Let's see, from Graves, he mentions the third little pig. Yes, from the story, and I believe the third little pig builds his house out of bricks. So, yes, he is kind of the trickster in that childhood story. I see also Robin Hood being mentioned. Robin Hood is one of the quintessential trickster characters. It's possible he was also a real person, or perhaps he was a composite of several different people, but great point. I see Rumpelstiltskin being mentioned. Yes, a very classic trickster, and also kind of reminiscent of the Fae. I think they're pulling in a bit of Fae lore there with Rumpelstiltskin. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, I see someone mentioning Anansi. We will be talking specifically about him in a little bit. Let's see. Oh, someone's mentioning Baba Yaga. Interesting. Baba Yaga is kind of a trickster because the tasks that she sets for people who come upon her house are kind of tricks in their own way. So that's a good point. Let's see. I see Peter Pan being mentioned. Peter Pan is a quintessential trickster. So that is one that definitely comes to mind. I see someone mentioning Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny is definitely the trickster archetype from Looney Tunes. Let's see, what else come to mind from children's stories? Ooh, I see someone mentioning Jack Frost. Yeah, I think he would qualify. I'm not as familiar with Jack Frost, but that's a good one. Okay, yeah. And some other ones that kind of come to mind is the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. If you've read the story through the Looking Glass or seen the Disney movie Alice in Wonderland, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He's very much the trickster. Let's see. I was also thinking of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. Here in America, I would consider those kind of two literary children's kind of archetypal tricksters. Brer Rabbit is another one coming from American stories and folklore. Another popular culture one that comes to mind is the Pink Panther. And one of the neat things, too, that I wonder about is it is very often that the tricksters in these stories are male. I don't really have a deeper thought behind that on why that might be. Maybe you guys do, but I find it interesting. It's hard to come up with female tricksters in popular culture. In terms of children's literature, I was thinking Matilda might be considered a trickster. She kind of has this special secret knowledge and power that she uses. But let me know if you can think of any female tricksters in popular culture, because it's been difficult to kind of find one to come to mind. Oh, I see Angelica from Rugrats being mentioned as a trickster. Um, Possibly, yeah. I think she is a trickster. Let's see. Someone's mentioning Harley Quinn. Is Harley Quinn a trickster? Hmm. I don't know, because you have to be conniving to be a trickster, and I don't know if her actions are that premeditated, um, or if she's just acting on instinct, but perhaps. Let's see. Oh, and I see here in the comments, Peach has an interesting thought. She says the reason females are often not in the trickster stories is that women are not encouraged to buck the system or to change the system in the world. Um, Good point. Let me see what else you guys have to say. I see someone mentioning that Catwoman could be considered a trickster. I see you guys mentioning Pippi Longstocking as a trickster. Possibly, yeah. So you guys are coming up with some good ones here. Shifting to just kind of some other literary tricksters before we jump into deities. Do any other tricksters come to mind from adult literature or movies or TV shows that you wanted to mention? I was thinking about Harry Potter, which is more young adult, but I was thinking Fred and George are definitely the trickster archetype, as is Peeves, the poltergeist. That came to mind. Let's see. I was also thinking of Puck in Midsummer Night's Dream from Shakespeare. I think he is definitely a trickster archetype and also very reminiscent of the Fae. And the Fae themselves kind of fall into the trickster archetype as a whole. Let me see. What else do you guys have to say? Oh, I see someone listing Doctor Strange as a trickster. Interesting. I'm not sure about that one, but maybe. Let's see. Oh, Lucy from I Love Lucy being a trickster. That's a good one that I had not thought of. Um, let's see. What else do you guys have to say? Um, Okay, what else do we have? Oh, the White Witch from Narnia being a trickster. Maybe. That's an interesting thought. Let's see. You guys are definitely coming up with a lot of good ones. And I think that this really does showcase how the trickster archetype is so pervasive in our stories throughout millennia, really, because we'll be discussing tricksters from pagan cultures, but the trickster archetype is something that is inherent in all of our stories across cultures, across the world. So even in modern times, we're seeing so many fascinating manifestations of this archetype. Oh, we have a super chat. Thank you so much. That mentions in Japanese mythology, the kitsune is often female and often a trickster. Thank you so much for mentioning that. That's a good point, and I should look more into kitsune because I think that's really neat. Let's see what else do we have here. Oh, interesting. Jill has a neat comment. She says, I feel a lot of tricksters are queer coded. You're probably thinking about that in terms of Loki. Um, but I think you have a general point there as well, because tricksters are boundary crossers. So you might find more characters that are kind of queer coded or non-binary or kind of um, existing outside of the norm throughout trickster stories, all the way from ancient times. So definitely great comment. Um, so now let's shift gears. Let's talk about some deities because in pretty much every civilization, there has been at least one or two trickster deities, and there's no way we could cover them all. That would take forever. But I did want to talk about a few of them. And of course, then I will ask you guys as well to list some of your favorites. But let's start here with the Greeks, because Hermes is actually considered to be a trickster deity. And I think that's interesting because he's one of the most important deities in the Greek pantheon, or if you're looking at the Roman pantheon, he's Mercury. So Hermes is the god of communication, as we know. He is also, like someone mentioned, queer coded. Hermes isn't necessarily queer, but um, he does have some kind of effeminate qualities, I would say. So that's interesting that you brought that up earlier. So Hermes is, among other things, he is the patron gods of thieves. So I think that's interesting. And among the Greeks, it was believed that Hermes invented lying, which makes sense in a lot of ways because Hermes is the god of communication. And so much of what makes the trickster is that he reaches his goals through the intellect, through the mind, through communication. If you look at the world through the four classical elements of earth, air, fire, and water, the trickster archetype falls squarely in the air element, right? Because the air element or the sword suit in tarot, it's about the mind, it's about our intellect, it's about the ability to use our intelligence and our cunning to get ahead in the world, which is completely different than um, like the fire element or the wands cards in tarot, which is all about our action, our confidence, our courage, our maybe our physical bravado, or water or the cup suit, which is emotions, or earth, which is our physical resources and wealth. So when we think about tricksters, it makes sense that a lot of them have this connotation with air. And Hermes, of course, has the winged sandals. So he is flitting about literally in the air. The Fae, too, if we're looking at the Celtic world, now we could get into the Fae, and I don't want to go too deep into that lore. You can look up several of my other previous pagan happy hours and videos about the Fae. But in modern versions of the Fae, they are creatures of the air, right? So you also have this connection with the Fae for trickery and being a creature of the air. So that's just kind of a neat thing to kind of keep in mind, that I think trickster deities in general have some type of quality of air about them, or that their strength comes entirely from their mental fortitude. Um, Let me see what you guys have to say here. Just going to check your comments for a second here. Let's see. Oh, interesting comment about the poltergeist in general, and that the poltergeists tend to be trickster spirits. That's true as well when you look at ghost stories. Poltergeists are the ones that can manipulate objects, so they can throw something. So they're also the ones that play tricks on you. It even makes me think of one of my all-time favorite horror movies, which is called Poltergeist. The poltergeist in that story also played tricks on the family. I don't know if you remember the scene where it stacks up all the chairs up on the kitchen table. So kind of being this very playful spirit. So poltergeists in general have this trickster quality to them that other paranormal spirits or entities might not. So that's a really good comment there. Let's see. Okay, so we talked a bit about Hermes. Now let's talk a bit about Loki, who I know all of you are probably well aware of Loki, so I don't need to dive too much into it. But Loki is the quintessential trickster deity, coming, of course, from the Norse pantheon. Loki is well known for bringing about chaos and discord in general. He tries to challenge the gods in a lot of ways, but by doing so, he also brings about change to the whole system. So I think you could look at it as without Loki's influence, the gods could become complacent. The status quo would just remain the same. So Loki's role within the Aesir in the Norse pantheon is to really shake up that status quo so that the rest of the gods don't become complacent, which might be easy to do, right? If you were a deity in Valhalla. So I think that Loki, well earns his place as the quintessential trickster deity. Now, Loki is interesting because he's also a shapeshifter. He is kind of switches genders in the story, including the one which most famously you probably already know. He turns into a horse, and then becomes pregnant as a horse, gives birth to Sleipnir. He's a female horse. So he definitely plays around with the concept of gender in the stories as a whole. And you kind of see this in other manifestations of Loki, though they don't really play into this too much in the Marvel Loki, which I kind of wish they did a little bit. But yeah, so he is definitely a boundary crosser in many senses of the word. He changes gender, he changes from animal to human, and he is always shaking up the status quo, kind of making him the perfect example of a trickster deity. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to share about Loki in general before we jump into a few other trickster deities? Because I know he is definitely a fan favorite. So many pagans really do love Loki and love thinking about him, even though, if I have to say, historically, many Norse peoples did not really worship Loki or honor him much, but he's definitely in modern day culture become kind of a phenomenon. But let me see what you guys have to say. I see Ari in the comments says killing Balder is taking it a bit too far. Yes, Loki was responsible for that. Yes, I think that has to do with mistletoe, where was it Frigg? Yeah, Frigg asked all the plants. Frigg was worried about Balder, and then made sure all the plants would not harm him, but she forgot to ask mistletoe, and then Loki makes like an arrow out of mistletoe, which kills Balder. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think that's the story. Let's see. Um, oh, interesting. Okay, Kaylee has a good point. She says they did hint at Loki's kind of genderqueer quality in the TV show, in the sense that he falls in love with an alter of himself that is from another universe that is female. So that's kind of true when you think about the person that he falls in love with in the show is actually himself, just an altered version of it. Um, let's see. Great points. Oh, good comment here from Old Battle Turtle that says, in my opinion, killing Balder was Loki telling the gods not to be overconfident. Yeah, I like that theory. I like what you're going for there. Peach says, I feel like the movies did Loki a disservice. He could have been so much more and so much better. I think so too. And especially in the Marvel TV series Loki on Disney Channel. Um, I was kind of hoping for more trickster qualities from Loki, but they kind of just led into the whole him battling with weapons. But Loki has this ability to connive and to trick people, right? He's a trickster. So I wish he had gotten ahead more from his um, mental strength and his cunning than just physical strength, because that's not what Loki's about inherently. That's like Thor, right? Loki doesn't use his physical strength to get ahead. He uses his conniving and his intelligence. And I wish the Disney show had played more into that. Let's see. Oh, good comment here from Peculiar Vixen that says Loki also likes to remind us that not everything needs to be super serious. That's a good point too. Tricksters help create a sense of levity towards life. Remind us that everything doesn't have to be so dang serious all the time. um, so, uh, Another trickster deity that I definitely wanted to discuss is Anansi. Have you heard about Anansi before? Let me know in the comments. This is an African deity, I think primarily from West Africa. And he takes the shape of a spider. And he is sometimes considered to be the god of all knowledge and the god of all stories, which kind of is interesting too when you think of a spider spinning the web. So, spinning the stories, spinning the knowledge. And he is overall best known for his ability to outsmart and triumph over more powerful opponents using his cunning, his creativity, and his intelligence. So, Anansi is this really important deity when we look at African pagan religions and spirituality. I see some of you guys mentioning that you were first introduced to Anansi in the American Gods TV series or in the book American Gods by Neil Gaiman. And yes, I think that book does a pretty good job of introducing people to Anansi and showing his abilities and his powers. So yeah, I highly recommend checking out that TV series or just reading that book in general. It's really fun for anyone who is interested in paganism. But I think Anansi, in particular in America, has kind of an extra importance here because he was kind of viewed as a symbol of slave resistance as a whole. Because Anansi is the one that's able to kind of turn the tables on his powerful oppressors in the stories, and he did that through cunning and trickery. So, the tales of Anansi, as the enslaved people brought those tales from Africa to the Americas, they kind of enabled the African people to kind of create a sense of continuation between their African home and America and with their past and spirituality as a whole. And it kind of offered them a means to kind of assert their identity within the boundaries of captivity. So sharing these stories of Anansi, I think is a part of history that we don't often learn about, especially here in America in the school system. We definitely learn about how the enslaved people in the South they were converted into Christianity, but we don't think that deeply about it. I think, or maybe we should think more deeply about the fact that through that process, um, the enslaved people lost their connection to Anansi and other African deities and the stories that those deities represented. I do think that's really interesting. And of course, I'm probably not the person to speak on this. I'm going to leave that for someone else to speak of. Um, but I think it's a part that's kind of left out of American history that we don't learn enough about is what African traditions were brought to America and then what was lost once Christianity took such a strong hold among the enslaved people, and those African traditions and deities were lost among the community here. Like it's probably surprising how few modern African Americans here in the States know about Anansi. I mean, some probably do, but it's such a huge part of that story of coming to America. And he had such a powerful role in West African religion. It's interesting that you don't hear more about him. But I just wanted to bring that up because I find it interesting. But let me see here. Oh, we have a super chat from Sarah mentioning trickster female deities. Yeah, we talked a bit about that. I'm going to talk a bit about that in a little bit, but thank you so much for this super chat. Let me see what you guys have to say about this. I see in the comments from VW that says the book American Gods really inspired me to look further into paganism. Yeah, it is a really great book. And of course, it has its faults. I think it's a bit long in places and it could have used, tighter editing. But, I'm glad that you found it so inspiring. Let's see. Oh, Leah is mentioning that the Netflix documentary High on the Hog talks about how African roots had their effect on American folk culture. Sounds like an interesting documentary. I should check it out. Let's see. Okay, let's see what else you guys have to say. Graves is mentioning that in early American history that the slaveholders didn't want to encourage worship of other gods. Yes, that's of course true. And by converting everyone to Christianity, it was a way to kind of erase their connection to Africa. Let's see. Good comments and questions. Let's see. So shifting away from an African trickster deity to a Native American one, I thought we would talk a bit about Coyote. So now this is tricky to talk about because there's so much variation among different tribes. So sometimes trickster deities in Native American stories are foolish. Other times they are wise. Sometimes they're the hero. Sometimes they're the villain. So there is, of course, a lot of variation here. But among some tribes, Coyote is considered to be the trickster and is also considered to be kind of a creator deity, which I think is neat, kind of giving that huge power to the trickster, to Coyote, as he is the boundary crosser, as he is the one that shakes up the system. It kind of makes sense that you could think of a trickster as a creator deity. In some stories, he's considered to have power over all other creatures. In some stories, he's considered to be a hero that tries to kill the Thunderbird. And then in some stories, in some tribes, he doesn't play as much of a role. So there is so much variation here. But in general, I would say that Coyote has persisted as one of the more popular trickster deities, especially here in America. And of course, in Native American stories and many African stories, deities are in the form of animal spirits. Though there are kind of other animals and animal spirits that you could consider to be tricksters. I'm curious to hear from you guys in the comments if there are other animals other than coyote that you consider to have this kind of trickster spirit to them. So let me see what you guys have to say about that. Okay. I see in the comments someone mentioning the snake. The snake has also been a historic trickster animal. You can look at Christianity for that in the Garden of Eden, right? The snake is the one that tricks Eve into eating the apple. So, but beyond that, the snake has had many instances of being kind of this trickster archetype throughout many different religions and time periods. I see several of you guys mentioning foxes being trickster animal. Definitely agree with that. I really enjoyed the movie Fantastic Mr. Fox, which really plays into the fox being this kind of trickster archetype. I see many of you guys mentioning crows, and crows make perfect sense as the trickster because they are very intelligent, as we are learning more and more about. And as we know, the trickster succeeds through his intelligence and his wit. And also, crows are animals of the sky. And we were talking earlier about how tricksters often have this air quality to them. So great ideas here. Oh, I see someone mentioning cats. Yeah, I think cats could be also considered to be a trickster. The Cheshire cat from Alice in Wonderland again comes to mind there. Great ideas here. Oh, I see someone mentioning octopus. They are interesting, and I could kind of see the octopus as a trickster in the sense of the boundary crosser. Like if you look up the octopus, like isn't like related to hardly any other animals. It's basically an alien. Like the octopus makes no sense from like an evolution standpoint. Super weird. So I could see where you're going with there. Oh, I see someone mentioning raccoons. Raccoons definitely have that trickster spirit. Ooh, we have a super chat here from Sarah. Thank you so much. She has a question about the Slavic goddess Morana as an indicator of coming death and whether that's metaphorical or literal. I'm not sure there. I am still learning about Slavic deities. So ask me in a month or two, and I might have a better answer for you there. But thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Oh, I see a few of you guys also mentioning some other animals here. Chameleons. Yes, chameleons make sense as a trickster. They're always changing. Sphinx is being mentioned as a trickster. Oh, that's an interesting point, especially when you're looking at a Greek interpretation of a sphinx, and sphinxes in the Greek stories were often tied to riddles or cryptic messages. You even see that in Harry Potter in like the fourth book. Very different than the Egyptian Sphinx, which is male. Oh, this is interesting when you think about it. The Egyptian Sphinx is male and associated with power and the pharaoh. The Greco-Roman Sphinx is female and associated with riddles. Kind of neat. I thought I would briefly mention a few other trickster deities. We, of course, don't have time to get into all of them, but a few others that come to mind. From the Greek pantheon, we have Eris. She is a goddess of chaos, and she is, in the stories, usually present in times of discord and strife. Though honestly, I don't recall hearing much about Eris, so she isn't a major deity here. Another one I wanted to bring up is Kokopelli. from the Hopi tribe. Now, Kokopelli is a trickster deity who is also a fertility deity, which is kind of a weird combo. You don't normally have the fertility deity and the trickster deity being kind of the same thing. But Kokopelli is pretty popular. I don't know if you remember, but like in like the early 2000s, late 90s, it seems like everyone was getting like Kokopelli tattoos in the States. But another one that comes to mind is Laverna. Laverna from the Roman pantheon. She is the goddess of thieves, cheats, liars, and fraudsters. So I love that. I feel like I need to do a whole video about Laverna because I want to learn so much more about her. That just sounds so fascinating. You also have Veles from the Slavic pantheon, kind of being a trickster deity as well. But I would love to hear from you guys in the comments if you have any other trickster deities that you really like and you want to share. Let me know in the comments because there are so many and you must have your own favorite trickster deity. So now is the time to share that. Let's see. Oh, we have a super chat from Evil Shannon. Thank you so much. I see someone listing their favorite trickster deity as Baba Yaga. Yes, Baba Yaga is so fun. I've done a couple videos about her. And the more I learn about her, the more I become obsessed. Let's see. Okay, what else do we have? Ooh, question from Robin that says, I wonder if the Morrigan would be considered to be a trickster, as she is a shapeshifter and sort of tricks men on the battlefield. Interesting question. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily consider her to be a trickster, but that's a good question. Let's see. I see Henry mentioning that a few of the yokai, Japanese kind of spirits and demons, are considered tricksters. Yes, there are so many fun yokai. I should probably do a whole pagan happy hour about yokai. Oh, I see someone mentioning the Leshy as the tree spirit from Slavic mythology being a trickster deity. I could see that. Let's see. Oh, Doc was mentioning the Monkey King from Chinese mythology. Yes, the Monkey King is a great example of the trickster deity or spirit. Let me see. Oh, okay. Joey is saying, I keep thinking about Lou and his connection with Cuchulainn. Some blogs that I looked up mentioned Lou being a trickster deity, and I couldn't find the source material for that. Like, because Lou is a battle deity. He's also a deity associated with the sun. If you think of Lu Nasad or the summer solstice, the sun, right? But I couldn't find anything specific on why people connect him as a trickster deity. So let me know in the comments if you know why Lu is sometimes considered to be a trickster deity. Now, Cuchulainn the warrior does kind of have a trickster component because in his death, I believe he like strapped himself to a rock where, he was like looking very menacing and warriors wouldn't approach because they thought he was still alive. And it was only when the raven landed on his shoulder, basically the Morrigan, telling the other warriors that he was actually dead, that people believed he was actually dead. So that's kind of like a trickster move, I think. Let me see, what else do we have? Okay. Ooh, good question. From B Nightfire asking, are there any ancient Egyptian tricksters? Ooh, I'm sure there are. I need to think about that though, because none initially come to mind, but I'm sure there's got to be some. So let me know in the comments if you can think of any. Ooh, Miguel Connor mentioned Sophia from the Gnostic myths and that she upends the heavenly order and helps humanity by upending the earthly order. She's a shapeshifter, bringer of knowledge, and often tricks both mortal and immortal. Um, Interesting. Oh, I would like to look into that more. And then I see someone mentioning kitsune as shapeshifters and tricksters in Japanese folklore. Yep, that's a good point. Ooh, John is mentioning Circe from Homer and the Greek myths. So, yeah, I think she could be considered a trickster. She is, of course, the quintessential sorceress or witch, but she does some kind of trickery things there. Let's see. I see someone mentioning about the Egyptian pantheon. Didn't Osiris come back to life? Yes, he did, but I wouldn't necessarily consider Osiris as a trickster deity. He was more a deity associated with fertility. Um, okay, interesting. Maybe Bess. I see some of you guys mentioning that from the Egyptian pantheon. That might work. Oh, and I see someone mentioning that Calypso would be more considered to be a trickster than Circe from the Greek myths. Yeah, I could see that too. That's a good point. So we have a few minutes left. I did want to briefly kind of discuss like why any of this is important or why should we even care. And I do think that the trickster is really important in modern day culture and society. It shouldn't be left in the past in these ancient stories. We need our trickster characters, our trickster spirits, our trickster deities, because it is important to upend the status quo from time to time. And the trickster has that role in society. So I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments here. But for me, I feel like if you live in a society without the tricksters, you are dooming yourself to complacency and you will remain static. So the tricksters are there in society, in the wider world, to shake things up when need be. So I think that even though we're talking about these ancient myths and stories, I think they still play a very big role in modern day life. Um, I see someone mention in the comments that rules are meant to be broken. Yes, that is what the trickster does. And I think that, the world would be very boring without the tricksters. So we do need them even in modern day times. So I think that it's neat looking back at how the trickster has evolved with these ancient cultures and societies and how he has persisted as an archetype, as a character in modern day society. So we do have a couple minutes left. I would love for you all to type in any questions you might have, whether that be about tricksters or anything pagan related. I'm going to have another sip of my drink. And of course, if you do enjoy Pagan Happy Hour, if you do find it valuable, it would mean the world to me if you would do a super chat or join my Patreon. Anything really helps keep this show going. So let me see what you guys have to ask in the comments. Let's see. I see in the comments that Joey says that tricksters can be an inspiration to those who may not be in positions of power or authority. Definitely agree. And you see that as we were talking about earlier with Anansi. Okay, let's see. Kalia is mentioning the character of Whiskey Jack in American Gods. Yeah, that's a super fascinating character and definitely kind of a trickster spirit. Oh, I see someone's asking me who is my favorite trickster. Ooh, that's a tough one. I almost feel like I can't answer. There's so many good ones. Of course, I love Loki, but I love learning about so many different types of tricksters that I can't pick one. Good question from Low Kitty that says, why are tricksters not valued as much as other deities? That's a good question. Usually the trickster is on the periphery. Like when you think about Loki, Loki isn't Odin or Thor, for example. Yes, often the trickster is on the periphery, but not always, as we mentioned with Coyote and Anansi having such large roles within the pantheon. But yeah, I think it's in part because Trickster works his magic behind the scenes. So yeah, that is kind of a good question there. Oh, we have a super chat from Teresa. Thank you so much. That says thanks for taking the time for these happy hours. Appreciate the research focused hangout. Oh, good. I'm glad you're enjoying it. This is my favorite kind of time of the week where I get to chat with you all and discuss different topics. And I feel like we have such great discussions. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, Kaylee has a question. Do you have a working with plant spirits video? I have, I think, a video that I made a couple years ago about working with nature spirits in your area. So yeah, I would recommend checking that one out. Let's see. Leah's mentioning that tricksters can get us to question the values of our society by finding loopholes. Definitely agree there. Awesome. Great question. Well, I think this is probably a good time to sign off for now. I want to thank you all so much for joining me for Pagan Happy Hour this April 1st. Cheers. And stay tuned. I'll, of course, be doing Pagan Happy Hour again next week. And I thank you guys so much for choosing to watch. If you haven't subscribed and liked yet, I encourage you to do that. It really does help out my channel. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.